Marcus Webb was absolutely certain his translation implant worked perfectly. It captured every word, converted every sentence flawlessly into English. The problem was that when Jales spoke, the words themselves told only half the story. The other half, perhaps the more important half, was hidden in those elegant, long ears. Taryn extended the invitation while his ears trembled with excitement, their tips curling slightly upward, glowing with a faint pink hue. Marcus knew this was a good sign. He'd learned at least that much during their 3 months of friendship. But what exactly the ears were saying, that was another matter entirely. "My mother is inviting you to the root binding ceremony," said Taryn, his voice full of joy. "This is a great honor, Marcus. Usually only family members and very close friends are invited. A human being invited. This has never happened before." Marcus took the invitation. Thin, translucent material etched with symbols that vibrated slightly when touched. "This is wonderful, Taryn, really, but—" He paused, searching for the right words. "I need to be honest. I still haven't cracked the language of your ears. What if I embarrass myself in front of your mother?" Taryn's ears tilted backward thoughtfully, then rotated forward again. "My mother is an understanding person, and you're willing to learn, that's what matters. Besides," he said, his ears now curling mischievously, "worst-case scenario, you'll have an interesting evening." "Your definition of interesting worries me." "Don't worry, we won't eat you alive. Jails are vegetarian." Marcus laughed, but his stomach remained knotted. When he'd come to Urandor Colony as an exchange student, he knew learning a foreign culture would be difficult. However, he hadn't anticipated that the jail communication system would be this complex. The next day, Taryn was trying to explain basic ear movements on the transport ship heading to the jail settlement. Now, when ears curl upward, this generally means happiness or excitement. When they sag downward, sadness or disappointment. When tilted backward, thought or evaluation. "I've got that much," said Marcus, taking notes. "But here's where it gets complicated," Taryn continued. "Speed matters. A slow curl means deep, lasting happiness. A fast curl means momentary joy. And angle matters too. A 15-degree upward curl is mild contentment, 30 degrees is enthusiasm, 45 degrees is nearly uncontrollable happiness." Marcus's pen stopped. "How am I supposed to measure the angle?" "You won't measure it, you'll feel it, with time." Taryn's ears tilted sideways apologetically. "I know it's difficult. We're born with this language for you to learn." "Impossible." "Not impossible, just requires patience." The ship slowed as its harmonic engines hit a high note. When Marcus looked out the window, his breath caught. The jail settlement consisted of massive structures made from living crystals. The buildings seemed to breathe, their walls slowly expanding and contracting, their colors shifting, reflecting the emotional state of the inhabitants within. "Our home is there," said Taryn, pointing to a bright turquoise structure. "Turquoise is our family's harmonic frequency. Every family has their own unique color." As Marcus looked at the structure, he noticed the color rippling slightly, darker then lighter, almost like breathing. "Beautiful," he said, but his voice was somewhat hoarse. Nervousness was tightening his chest. Taryn's ears trembled with concern. "Are you nervous?" "A little." "Just be yourself. My mother is very good at reading people. Fakeness bothers her more than any glitch in ear movements." This wasn't particularly reassuring, but Marcus nodded. The house door opened automatically as they approached. The crystal structure seemed to recognize Taryn's harmonic signature. When they entered, a wave of warmth greeted Marcus, both physical and somehow emotional. The air carried a sweet, floral scent, and the walls responded to their presence by turning a slightly brighter turquoise. And then Matriarch Savara appeared. Marcus knew Taryn's mother would be impressive, but he wasn't prepared. Tall, perhaps 6 feet, silver hair cascading to her waist. Her face had sharp features, high cheekbones, thin lips, intelligent eyes. But her most striking feature was her ears. Extraordinarily long, at least 12 inches, their tips elegantly curved, each adorned with 3 or 4 silver rings. The ears began dancing under Marcus's gaze, tilting slightly forward, then rotating backward, followed by a small, rapid tremor. Taryn quickly whispered, "She's welcoming you, evaluating you, but with good intentions." As Marcus tried to process this information, Sevara spoke. Her voice was melodic and deep, like a cello. "Marcus Webb, welcome to our home. My son has told me much about you." "Thank you, Matriarch Sevara. I'm honored you've accepted me." Marcus bowed, exactly 15 degrees as Taryn had taught him. Sevara's ears curled slightly upward, but Marcus couldn't distinguish whether this was genuine pleasure or polite acceptance. "Please come inside. Your family is here." When they entered the living room, Marcus encountered 2 more people. Cale, Taryn's father, was a middle-aged, calm-looking man. His ears weren't as ornate as Sevara's, just 2 simple silver rings, but they were equally expressive. Lyris, Taryn's sister, perhaps 16 years old, was studying Marcus with curious eyes, her ears swinging impatiently back and forth. When everyone sat down, Marcus faced a strange awareness. Everyone's ears in the room were in constant motion. Taryn's trembled with excitement, Lyris's curled with curiosity, Cale's tilted slightly forward with calm but careful attention, and Sevara's traced a complex, difficult-to-read pattern. And then the conversation began. The words were perfectly translated through Marcus's implant, but Marcus quickly realized the actual conversation wasn't in the words. Sevara said something, on the surface a simple question, "Are you adjusting to colony life?" But her ears performed a complex movement while asking. Slight backward tilt, then forward lean, then tips turning slightly downward. Taryn immediately responded with his own ears, and Lyris giggled, her ears trembling with joy. Marcus just sat there, completely lost. Taryn noticed and tried to help. "My mother was asking if you could handle the bureaucratic labyrinth of colony administration, which is sort of a family joke for us, because my father used to work as a bureaucrat and was famous for confusing everyone." "Ah," said Marcus with a forced smile. But the joke had already passed, and his delayed reaction created an awkward silence in the room. Dinner was even more difficult. The food was unfamiliar: bioluminescent mushrooms, crystallized fruits, vegetables cooked through harmonic resonance. But the real challenge wasn't in the food. The challenge lay in the communication at the table. Every few minutes, one of the family members would say something, and others would laugh or react. Marcus only heard the words, but the actual comedy, the real meaning, was in the ears. At one point, Lyris said something. The translation came through as, "I finished my physics project at school." But her ears moved so dramatically that everyone burst into laughter. Even Taryn laughed until tears streamed from his eyes. Marcus just sat and smiled, feeling completely outside. After dinner, Marcus asked permission to use the bathroom. In the bathroom, he looked in the mirror. His own reflection stared back, normal human ears, small, motionless, expressionless. These ears said nothing. They conveyed no emotion. They just sat there, silent and lifeless. Marcus took a deep breath. "It's going to be a long night," he murmured to himself, and he was right. Chapter 2. The first night ritual of the root binding ceremony began with family stories being told. Marcus watched Sevara rise elegantly and move to the center of the room. The walls responded to her movement, turning a deeper blue, an appropriate atmosphere for storytelling. "Tonight," said Sevara, her voice carrying ceremonial weight, "we share the stories of our ancestors, we remember our roots, and we include our guest Marcus in this tradition." Marcus's stomach knotted. Being included sounded nice, but he had no idea how he'd be included. Sevara began to narrate. Her voice was melodic, her words carefully chosen. The translation implant worked perfectly. Long ago, when the first jails traveled among the stars, there was a hero named Velerin. He set out to lead his people to a new home. The words were beautiful, the story engaging. But Marcus quickly realized the real magic was in the ears. As Savara narrated, her ears danced with the story. When Velarin faced danger, her ears tilted backward and trembled slightly, fear, but mixed with courage. When the hero decided to make a sacrifice, her ears slowly leaned downward, their tips nearly touching her shoulders, deep sadness but acceptance. And finally, when his people were saved, her ears shot upward and vibrated rapidly. Enthusiasm, relief, triumph. The family members were completely absorbed in the story. Taran's eyes sparkled, his ears mirroring his mother's to reflect the emotions. Lyriss's ears trembled with excitement. Even Kale's usually calm ears moved slightly at critical moments. And Marcus only understood half. He heard the words, hero, journey, sacrifice, triumph. But he missed the depth of emotion carried by the ear movements, the character's inner conflict, the soul of the story. It was like watching a movie with the sound off. The images were there, but the music, the emotional resonance was missing. When the story ended, everyone applauded, but jail-style applause, using their ears, not their hands. Their ears moved rapidly up and down like flapping wings. Marcus, not knowing what to do, just clapped his hands. The sound was strangely loud in the midst of the silent ear applause in the room. Lyris looked at him, her ears curled with curiosity. Human applause, she said, her voice amused. Interesting. Marcus felt his face flush. Sorry, I can't move my ears. I know, said Lyris, but her voice wasn't judgmental, just different. Then it was Taran's turn. He stood, his ears tilted slightly backward with nervousness. I want to tell the story of meeting Marcus, he said. Marcus got excited. Finally, a story he could understand. He'd been there, he remembered every moment. At the colony library, they'd both reach for the same book, a text on jail philosophy. Taran wanted to learn English, Marcus wanted to learn jail culture. A natural friendship had begun. But when Taran began narrating, Marcus was shocked. When I first saw him, said Taran, my ears trembled with curiosity. And indeed, his ears trembled slightly, but they also tilted backward, which Marcus would later learn meant cautious curiosity. A human, interested in jail philosophy, a rare thing. Marcus didn't remember this. He'd never noticed how Taran's ears had moved that day. Then we started talking, Taran continued. And Marcus said something, I want to understand, not just know, and my ears. He paused, and his ears slowly, deliberately leaned forward, their tips curving slightly upward. Respect. I felt real deep respect. Marcus remembered this moment, but not Taran's ears. He only remembered his words, his smile. He'd completely missed what the ears were saying. Taran continued the story, and with each memory, Marcus realized how much of their friendship he'd missed. Moments when Taran had worried, his ears leaning down, Marcus had never noticed. Moments when Taran had felt pride, his ears shooting up, Marcus hadn't seen. Moments when Taran had been grateful, his ears trembling softly, Marcus couldn't read. When the story ended, the family responded warmly. Savara's ears trembled with pride and affection. Lyris's swung with joy. Kale's tilted forward slightly with approval. And Marcus sat there, grappling with the shock of realizing he hadn't lived half of his own friendship. During the meal break, he escaped to the kitchen. He needed some time alone to gather his thoughts, but Kale followed him. Taran's father was a quiet man. Marcus had noticed this before. He didn't talk much, but his ears were constantly in motion, silently communicating. Now extending a glass of glowing liquid to Marcus, his ears tilted slightly sideways. Difficult, isn't it? Said Kale, his voice soft. Understanding only half. Marcus took the glass, noticing the strange, comforting scent of the liquid inside. I'm not even sure I understand half, he confessed. Maybe 10%. Kale laughed softly, and his ears trembled with joy. Marcus could now recognize this. Most humans don't even try. They see our communication as primitive or unnecessary. They think technology can translate everything. I used to think that too, said Marcus. Now I know the translation implant only translates words, but your language is much more than words. Kale's ears tilted forward with appreciation. Correct. Words are the skeleton. Ear movements are the flesh and spirit. Together they form a complete being. Marcus looked at his glass, the bioluminescent liquid inside slowly changing color. So am I only talking to you with skeletons? You could say that, said Kale, but his voice wasn't judgmental. But even skeleton is something. Some humans don't bother to give even that much. As the night progressed, misunderstandings continued to accumulate. Marcus tried to compliment Lyris, said her hair looked beautiful. Lyris's ears immediately tilted backward and hardened. Taryn quickly intervened. In jail culture, commenting on someone's physical appearance, especially hair, without ear movements is considered superficial and rude. It's like saying you only see their shell, not their soul. Marcus's face flushed. I'm sorry, Lyris, I didn't know that. In human culture, it's a compliment. Lyris's ears slowly softened. Accepted. But next time, maybe comment on my work or thoughts. Okay, promise. Later, Marcus tried to thank Sevara for dinner. He chose formal, polite words, as his diplomatic training had taught him. Matriarch Sevara, I offer my deepest gratitude for your hospitality. This honor affects me profoundly. Sevara's ears moved strangely. Marcus couldn't read it. Taryn later explained. You spoke too formally. Among us, excessive formality means distance. It's like you don't want to know our family, just following protocol. Marcus put his head in his hands. I'm doing everything wrong. Not wrong, said Taryn, his ears trembling softly with affection. Just different, you're learning. But the worst came when Taryn made a joke. Marcus heard the words, a play on words, a term meaning two things in the jail language. Everyone laughed, their ears trembling with joy. Marcus laughed too, smiling and nodding. But the moment his laugh was fake was obvious. His ears didn't move because human ears don't move. And jails instantly recognized that a laugh without ear movements wasn't genuine. The room fell silent. Everyone looked at Marcus, and in that moment, Marcus had never felt so foreign. Taryn's ears sagged with sadness and shame. Lyris's curled with curiosity, but there was pity in them. Kale's tilted backward thoughtfully, and Sevara's. Marcus couldn't read them, but he felt an intense evaluation taking place. Marcus, didn't know what to say. I didn't understand the joke. I pretended to laugh, I'm sorry. Taryn stood up. Marcus, maybe you should. No, said Marcus, cutting him off. I don't need to leave, I just need to be honest. He took a deep breath. I'm lost. Completely. I don't understand your language, your real language, what your ears are saying. And this makes me feel terrible because you invited me to your home, gave me this honor, and in return I can't understand anything. There was a long silence in the room. Then surprisingly, Sevara spoke. Honesty, she said, her ears moving slowly, thoughtfully. That's valuable. Most guests don't admit they don't understand. I appreciate your courage. Marcus's heart eased slightly but still remained heavy. That night when he retreated to his room, he lay on the bed and stared at the ceiling. The crystal structure, reflecting his emotional state, had turned a light gray. Appropriate, Marcus thought. Gray, uncertain, lost, neither here nor there. But instead of sleeping, he began to think. He couldn't move his ears. This wouldn't change, but maybe. Maybe if he couldn't use his ears, he could use his eyes. A plan began taking shape in his mind. When he tried to sleep, for the first time that night he felt a faint hope. Morning would look different. At least he hoped so. When the morning sun filtered through the crystal walls, painting the room in rainbow colors, Marcus was already awake. He'd refined his plan throughout the night. Reduce talking, increase observation. When you don't understand, don't guess, ask. And most importantly, don't fake it. When he came down to the breakfast table, the family had already gathered. Taryn's ears trembled with concern when he saw him, still carrying the disappointment of last night. Lyris watched curiously. Kale was calm and observant, and Sevara. Marcus tried to read her ears, slight forward lean, minimal tip movement, evaluation, expectation. He didn't know, but this time not knowing was okay, because he would ask. Matriarch Savara, said Marcus before sitting down. Your ear's current position, slightly leaning forward, tip stable. What does this mean? I'm curious. There was a silence in the room. Everyone's ears moved in different directions with surprise. Marcus didn't even know what this meant, but he must have broken something, in a good or bad sense. Savara's ears slowly, thoughtfully tilted backward, then rotated forward again. Interesting question, she finally said. Most humans don't ask. They either ignore or assume they understand. She paused. My ears were in careful expectation. I was wondering how you'd behave today after last night. Thank you, said Marcus sincerely, for explaining. Throughout breakfast, Marcus applied his new strategy. Instead of talking, he watched. He noted every ear movement in his mind carefully. He saw how Savara's ears calmed when she poured tea. He noticed how Lyris's ears trembled impatiently when reaching for bread. He recorded how Kale's ears tilted slightly backward when lost in thought. Slowly, patterns began to emerge. Not a language yet, but a feeling and intuition. Ears leaning forward meant interest, tilted backward meant thought or distance, trembling meant emotional intensity. Taryn noticed Marcus's silence. After breakfast, he pulled him aside. Are you okay? You were very quiet last night, and now too. Marcus smiled, this time a genuine smile. I'm learning to listen, just in a different way. Taryn's ears curled with curiosity, tips turning upward. Marcus could now read this, surprise but the positive kind. What do you mean? I can't move my ears. This will never change. But I can use my eyes. I can watch, learn, ask questions. Maybe I'll never be fluent like you, but at least I can try to understand. Taryn's ears made a slow, deep movement, forward lean, tips trembling softly as they curved upward. Marcus couldn't fully translate this, but somehow he knew. Taryn was impressed. In the afternoon, the second phase of the root binding ceremony began, crafting. Each family member would create a gift, objects made from harmonic crystals that reflected the user's emotional state. This tradition was about transforming love and devotion into tangible form. You don't have to participate, said Taryn, preparing materials. This requires quite advanced skill. Feeling and shaping the harmonic frequency of crystals takes years. I want to try, said Marcus with determination. Lyris showed him basic techniques. The crystals vibrated slightly when touched, each had its own unique frequency. The goal was to transform the crystal into the desired shape by feeling and guiding these frequencies. Marcus concentrated on the crystal in his hand. He felt the vibration, faint, almost imperceptible humming. He tried to shape it, imagining a flower in his mind. The crystal moved slightly. The result looked less like a flower and more like a crushed insect. Lyris giggled, her ears trembling with joy. At least something happened. Most humans can't move the crystal at all. Is this a success? Marcus looked doubtfully. Definitely. Harmonic resonance requires consciousness. Your consciousness reached the crystal, it's just communication is a bit broken. Marcus laughed. Story sounds familiar. While working, Lyris began talking to him. Why do you try so hard? Her ears were curled with curiosity, but there was a genuine question in them. Most humans give up after one night. Or don't even try. Marcus looked at the crystal in his hands, still ugly, still shapeless, but full of the effort he'd put into it. Because Lyris's ears froze for a moment, then slowly, respectfully leaned forward. That's a beautiful thought, she said, her voice soft. Marcus continued working. He shaped the crystal, reshaped it, broke it, tried again. The result still wasn't perfect, actually. It remained quite ugly. But the intention he'd put into it, patience and desire to learn, resonated as a warmth in the crystal. At dinner, Marcus still didn't understand most ear movements, but now he knew when he didn't understand. And more importantly, he'd learned to ask. At one point, Savara said something and her ears traced a complex pattern. Marcus didn't understand, but this time he asked, "What did your ears just say? May I ask?" Savara looked surprised. Her ears tilted back slightly, thought, then slowly rotated forward. "You're asking this is unusual," she said. "Most humans ignore our ears or assume they understand. You're not ignoring nor assuming, you're trying to see." "I want to see," said Marcus sincerely, "even if I can't understand." Sevara's ears made a slow, deep movement, forward lean, tips curving slightly upward, minimal but meaningful tremor. "My ears are showing respect now," she said. "I respect your effort, your intention." Marcus's heart warmed. After dinner, Marcus's ugly crystal gift was placed in the center of the table. Next to the others, Taryn's elegant seashell, Lyris's intricate star, Kale's perfect sphere, Marcus's looked ridiculous. Shapeless, asymmetric, strange. But Sevara picked it up, examined it carefully. Her ears moved slowly. Marcus tried to read it. First backward tilt, evaluation. Then forward lean, interest. And then a slow, deep tremor, emotion. "This crystal," said Sevara, her voice thoughtful, "isn't perfect. Its shape is unclear, its lines rough, but the harmonic resonance inside." She paused. "I feel sincerity, patience, desire to learn. This is more valuable than appearance." Marcus's eyes watered slightly, but he tried to hide it. Taryn touched his shoulder. "See, my mother looks at intention, not shape, and your intention shines in the crystal." "Shines in an ugly way," said Marcus, laughing softly. "Maybe. But brightness is brightness." Taryn's ears trembled with joy. As night progressed, Marcus began to understand the family dynamics better. Sevara, beneath her stern exterior, was a leader who deeply cared about family. Kale, speaking little but observing everything, was a sage. Lyris, young and curious, loved testing boundaries but had a good heart. And Taryn was a much deeper and more thoughtful friend than Marcus had realized. Before bed, Taryn came to Marcus's room. "You were different today," he said, standing in the doorway. "In a good way." "In a very good way." Taryn's ears trembled warmly. "Last night you struggled to impress my mother. Today you won her." "Really?" "She's keeping your crystal, put it on her own shelf. That's a great honor." Taryn smiled, despite it being ugly. Marcus laughed. "You're still admitting it's ugly." "Yes, it looks terrible, but it feels beautiful." In jail aesthetics, feeling comes before appearance. That night when Marcus fell asleep, there was a slight smile on his face. The crystal walls, reflecting his emotional state, had turned a soft golden color. Warmth. Acceptance. The beginning of belonging. Tomorrow was the last day, and Marcus now felt excitement about winning rather than fear of losing. The final day of the root binding ceremony was the peak of a transformation for Marcus. When he got out of bed, the crystal walls had turned a bright turquoise, the family's color. The structure was beginning to recognize him. The morning ritual was a ceremony where each family member expressed gratitude to the others. For Jales, this was a complex dance performed with ears, wordless but deeply meaningful. Marcus didn't know how he'd participate with his motionless ears. When the family gathered in the living room, tension was palpable in the air. Everyone looked at Marcus, a mixture of curiosity, concern, expectation. Sevara started first. She turned to Kale and her ears moved slowly, deliberately. A long, deep forward lean, tips trembling gently, then curving upward. No words were spoken, but the meaning was clear. Deep love, gratitude, appreciation for partnership. Kale responded, writing a silent poem with his own ears. Then Lyris to Taryn, Taryn to Sevara, Kale to Lyris. Each exchange was a silent but powerful communication through ears. And then it was Marcus's turn. Everyone looked at him. The silence grew heavy. Marcus took a deep breath and stood up. He couldn't move his ears. This would never change. But he had other ways. He turned to Sevara first. Slowly, deliberately, he bowed, exactly 15 degrees, proper to jail tradition. Then he placed his hand over his heart and met her eyes. He held this for several seconds, saying no words. His gesture carried his intention: gratitude, respect, thanks for the opportunity to learn. Sevara's ears tilted back slightly with surprise, then slowly rotated forward with a deep movement of softening. Acceptance, respect, understanding, she had understood him. Marcus turned to Taryn. This time he did something different. He pulled out a small notebook from his pocket, observations he'd kept for the past 2 days. Inside were drawings of Taryn's ear movements, with Marcus's guessed meanings written beside each: happy, worried, thoughtful, joking. Some were correct, most were wrong, but all were recorded with care and attention. "I'm trying to understand you," said Marcus, voice full of sincerity. "It's not perfect, but I'm working on it." Taryn took the notebook, flipped through the pages. His eyes began to water. His ears traced the most complex pattern Marcus had ever seen: happiness, surprise, gratitude, friendship, all together, layered and deep. And then Taryn did something Marcus didn't expect. He hugged him. A tight, long, human-style hug. For Jael's, physical contact was rare. They usually expressed emotions through ears. But Taryn had chosen to speak in Marcus's language, through touch, embrace, human gestures. "You're trying to understand me too," said Marcus, his voice choked. "Of course, friendship isn't one-sided." There was movement in the room. When Marcus separated from the hug, he saw that Lyris's eyes had also watered. Kale's ears were leaned forward with deep respect, and Sevara was smiling, a genuine, warm smile. Lyris stepped forward and handed Marcus a small booklet. "I prepared this for you," she said. "An ear movement guide. Designed for human learners, in my own handwriting." Marcus took the booklet, opened it inside. Each page had detailed drawings, ear positions, movements, their meanings. Alongside were explanations, context notes, even common misunderstandings. Lyris must have worked on this for hours. "This is incredible," said Marcus, his voice breaking. "When did you make this?" "At night, couldn't sleep." Lyris's ears tilted back slightly with embarrassment. "After seeing your effort, I wanted to help." Kale also stepped forward. In his hands was Marcus's ugly crystal, but it was no longer ugly. Kale had taken it, masterfully reshaped it. The original form was still there, Marcus's intention, effort, desire to learn, but now surrounded by an elegant frame, rough edges softened, asymmetry transformed into a design element. "Your intention," said Kale, "combined with my skills, a collaboration between us." Marcus took the crystal, turned it in his hand. It was beautiful, beautiful in a strange way, but beautiful. A union of his effort and Kale's mastery. "Thank you," he said, his voice trembling. "All of you this week changed my life." Sevara stood up and stepped forward. "Marcus Webb," she said, her voice official but warm. "You came to our home as a stranger, but you leave as a friend." Her ears made a deep, deliberate movement. Marcus could now read this. Acceptance. Official acceptance. The root binding ceremony is where family takes strangers into their circle. "You, Marcus, are no longer a stranger." Marcus's eyes watered, he didn't hide it. "This is a great honor," he said, bowing. "You earned it," said Sevara simply. When time for farewell came, Marcus thanked everyone individually. Sevara for her wisdom and patience, Kale for his silent support, Lyris for her guide and curiosity, and Taryn for everything he'd started. Walking toward the transport ship, Marcus looked back. The turquoise crystal structure sparkled under the sun. Inside, the family's ears were probably still in motion, having silent conversations, sharing emotions. Marcus still couldn't understand most of these conversations, but now he knew it didn't matter. What mattered was trying to understand. On the ship, Taryn sat beside him. The engines hummed and takeoff began. Through the window, stars appeared, infinite, distant, mysterious. "I didn't understand everything," Marcus finally said, breaking the silence. "I know," said Taryn, his ears smiling gently. Marcus could read this now. "But I tried to be present." "And sometimes," said Taryn, turning to him, "presence is more important than understanding." Marcus thought about this. 3 days ago, he'd thought communication was about words and translation devices. Choose the right words, use the right technology, and understanding comes automatically. Now he knew it was much more complex. Communication wasn't just words. It was intention, empathy, patience, and most importantly, the courage to try to understand even when you don't. "Next time I'll be better," said Marcus. Taryn's ears curled with curiosity. "Next time." Marcus smiled and pulled a folded paper from his pocket. A handwritten invitation from Sevara, small ear symbols drawn on the edges. "For the winter festival. Your mother invited me again," he said. Taryn looked at the paper, then at Marcus. His ears began dancing with joy, fast, enthusiastic, pure happiness. Marcus could read this perfectly now. "This is wonderful," said Taryn. "The winter festival is our most beautiful ceremony, and my mother inviting you again. This is truly a great honor." Marcus tried to read the invitation. The symbols still difficult to decode, but he recognized some. And at the very bottom, in Sevara's handwriting, was a note. "This time bring your ears too." Taryn saw the note and burst out laughing. "My mother is joking, rare thing. I know I won't be able to move my ears. She knows too. But the message is clear, come as you are but keep learning." Taryn's ears trembled with warmth. "And you will learn, I know this." Marcus looked out the window. The stars were shining, infinite and mysterious. Each one a world, each world a culture, each culture a language made not